Howdy, folks. Good afternoon. Good to be back. I see here we had some response to the poll in the chat there. It looks like overwhelmingly dark roast fans here, which is fine by me. I like all of them, but I do tend to prefer dark roasts. So that's what I'm drinking today here. It was very kindly brought to me from the land up north by a good friend of ours who just came back from Maine. I forget what this is, but sure do like it. My wife brewed it up for me with pour over, which is one of my favorite kinds. I like drip, I like pour over, espresso, French press, AeroPress, all of those. But I think pour over is pretty. It's probably got to be the best flavor. I don't know how to do it. I've watched her do it, and there seems to be a certain magic to it that she just kind of has, and I haven't quite grasped it yet. But yeah, good cup of coffee. Morning, Robert. Good to see you. I have a couple neat things to show before we get going too much here. You may have seen this on my Instagram. This is the Leatherdex. I was looking at Rolodexes a couple weeks ago because my wife and I had this funny idea that it would be interesting to store cocktail recipes in a really nice 60s Rolodex. And so I went down an eBay hole looking at them, and I came across a lot of them that are really beautifully designed, and would certainly be at home in our place here. But I came across this one, and I've never seen one like this before. This was a pocket Rolodex, and the thing I was smitten by it the moment I saw it, and I couldn't believe that it is actually, in total dimensions, it is smaller than a credit card. Now, obviously, much thicker, but I saw that. Wow, that would be a great candidate for something. I didn't really know what at the time, but I knew it would look nice all cleaned up. So if you look on my Instagram, there's a reel that shows a little bit of me. I took it apart. I stripped all the old paint off. This was all painted with some kind of gold metallic paint that had flaked off, and this was painted brown, but it had completely come off the bottom there. So this was all just bare steel. So I stripped all of it. I repainted the steel case. Nice Tamiya acrylic enamel model paint. Really nice stuff. I stripped all the paint off the top here and polished this. And I took the plastic sides and I actually wrapped that in very thin calf skin. And I thought it would be fun to put some leather swatches inside it. So I have all 15 of the colors of Botero that I use on the inside of this. And I don't really do many in-person consultations, but it would definitely be fun for the few times I do to bring this and say, oh, you want to see some samples? Here you go, pop this open and take a look at it. This normally had, there's a slider that goes on this end here that would go through the letters of the alphabet, so you could open it up to whatever page you wanted to. It doesn't really work with what I've changed it to, so I chose to omit that, and I covered up this section here with a piece of 68 dated calf skin with my logo foil stamped on it, which I think answers quite nicely. But remarkable to think that this here is all done by a phone these days, and done infinitely better, infinitely more convenient and more storage capacity. But I like analog solutions to problems. This was just I saw it and I had to have it. It was $5. It was actually $6, and eBay knew exactly how to get me. Like, hey, would you take it for $5? And I said, oh yeah, I'll take it for $5. And thus I ended up with it. So it was a fun little side project. I like to do these from time to time. No real rhyme or reason to it. There was a time many years ago where I used to take antique electric fans. I would take them and strip them apart and repaint them and make them look all pretty and brand new and rewire them. Nice vintage braided cords on there and things like that. And that was a fun project, but really had no practical use. A man really only needs one fan, so I gave them all away. That was fun, but I'm glad I found something much more practical to do. That is, of course, leatherworking. One other thing to show. Let me put this away here. Yeah. One other thing worth showing off. This was my project over the weekend here. I had a spate of requests for the Himalayan pattern. And this one was a mid wallet with the white goatskin and the rose gold metallic inside. It's actually so bright that the camera is washing out on it, but this I think actually is one of the prettiest wallets I may have ever made. The white chev, rose gold chev, with a dark brown coppery type stitch here, because surprisingly enough, I bought every color of Vinimo direct from the manufacturer, and there was no rose gold color in their thread options. So I had to kind of find something that worked tonally and accented everything, and this brown works pretty well. This is a piece of Himalayan, this is actually neck on the back. The hide is much larger than this, so it was too wide to get this nice color gradient on the side there, but the neck was perfect for it. So if you're using alligator, don't discount the neck and the upper tail sections. They are really useful. They have really interesting scale patterns, so you can make some lovely wallets out of them. It would be hard not to tell if this wasn't a small little caiman or something like that. It looks like it could be a piece of belly, but nope, it's actually neck. So really happy with how this one turned out. I still have to paint the edges on it there. You can see the various layers of it there. I think this ended up being, let me count here. How many layers was this at the edge? I think it's 7 or 8 layers at the edge there, depending on where you measure it. So that's another thing for me to pick away at through the week here. It's back on the shelf. So today, as the thumbnail suggests, I'm working on a big red wallet. This is another one that I had posted a couple weeks back. I had done it in brown as a prototype wallet. This is going to be what you might consider a Japanese-style biker wallet. It'll have a chain on the back and things like that. And I'm doing this for a very old friend of mine who wanted this kind of style and wanted it all in red, of course, very suited to him. So I've only made one of these before, so I'm working off somewhat of a prototype pattern here. I've made a couple of revisions from the first one I made. One thing that I got wrong on the first time around was these tall wallets. Anytime you're stacking cards vertically, you need a lot more width to your card slots than you think you're going to. There's so much more card being stowed that it really adds up quite a bit of depth when you start stacking them in there. So you have to add an extra amount of margin to the width of your card slots because they're going to be much wider down here than they are up at the top. And you take a look at the side, you can immediately see why. You can see how stacked that gets down there at the bottom. So that's all extra. That's almost an extra 1/4 inch of extra space needed to wrap around that. And I had neglected to add enough space to it. I had just enough to where I could make it work comfortably. That the cards weren't too tight. It worked, but it was more of a gamble than I had wanted to do. So on this time around, I made those extra wide, so I had plenty of room to wrap those around there and make them fit. And I got these nice and trued up and square, and I'm very happy with how that turned out. I seem to get my camera to position properly today. I must have bumped it at some point. I think that looks okay. A little odd, but nah, something's not right about that. Doesn't look right with that. On earth have I done? Otis, you fool. I think we're gonna have to call it at that. I think that's gonna have to be good enough. That's pretty good. Thank you, Softme. Yes. And that again is just done by everything is cut oversized. So when it's all glued down before it's trimmed, it's a mess. It's all different thicknesses, at the top and at the bottom there. And once you kind of get your guidelines marked out, you can trace a straight line on it. You can cut it trim and flush, and it looks quite smart. Or if you're referring to these here, the winglets I call them. If you check a couple streams back, you'll see how I do those. Mostly it's just a matter of pushing them up. In fact, I've got a little bit little bit of delamination there I need to glue down. Something else worth noting on this wallet that I tried, on this particular one that I have not done before, is I tried a new method of attaching the T-slots. And there are no stitches in these card slots, none at all. The only stitches are the ones going around the perimeter there. So I'm not 100% certain if that's truly a time savings or not yet. I think it is. I think it will be, not having to stitch these down there. I just have to further refine the method of it. And by the time first one I did was kind of a pain in the butt, and the second one I had a lot better experience with. But basically these, show you how these work. There are, this is what the card slots are actually backed with, so that's this piece right here, this top piece. And it runs down to about here. And the card slots have, they've got the T slots up here. There's an extra flap down at the bottom that fits in here. And is then folded up backwards over top there. And it's glued down that way. And I was pretty pleased with that. I'm actually quite happy with how that worked out, because I really hate stitching card slots, and I don't really want to machine stitch them. I'd rather find a better way of doing that. So I think this is maybe the way I will pursue this in the future here. The other nice thing about it is it lets me cover up the backside, whereas before, on my other bifolds, this would be a burnished back, and you would be able to feel the stitches through there. That all gets covered up with an extra piece on the back there, so the rear of these are nice and smooth and clean. So experimenting with that system there, pretty happy with it so far. Like I said, I think it's a matter of figuring out the technique for it to really get a good time savings there. And there's certainly an argument as well to be made for a strength increase with that too, because you're not perforating the bottom of the T slots. I think more is made of that than probably really matters, because I think if you're putting enough cards in there to explode the stitch on the bottom of the T slot, that's on the user and not on you. You shouldn't, just don't put that many cards in there. But so any way to make a wallet stronger is probably better. So I think this may be the way I do them in the future. I want to practice the method a little bit more so I don't look like a fool doing it. And then once I have it kind of worked out to where I'm reasonably proficient at it, I'll show that on the stream in there, and you guys can see what you think of it. So I have these 2 banks of card slots ready to go. And the way this wallet goes together, you may have seen this as well on my Instagram. This is we're going to be doing a little bit of hand perforation today. These are going to arrange like this. So this actually is going to be behind these, kind of floating back here. And this will be the opening of the billfold. Rest there. Rest there. And they're actually going to float. They're not stitched on the inside to this. So that lets these kind of lift up in the center there to put stuff behind it. And there's also the billfold behind it there. That will sit on, this will be the wallet back on the outside. And there will be this little strip across the top there. Kind of dress that up on the inside. Cover up that stitch line. And also, the way it is spaced, pay attention to this margin here. So these go like this. These sit like this. And to account for that extra space there, and also dress it up additionally, I have this guy right here. It goes across the top there, and you notice it's sized right there to perfectly fill in that little bit of space there. That gives me a nice consistent thickness of my edge at the outside there. The other purpose for this as well, like I said, this is going to be a wallet with a chain on it. So I want to have the chain in the Japanese style coming out on the fold up at the top there, but it's got a big brass screw on the back side that isn't really that pretty to look at. So this will also serve to cover up that screw on the inside. I need to play with this a little bit more. I need to basically add a little droop there to further cover that. I've seen some guys will do an extra stitch to the outside to stow that. I don't really care for that as much. I think I'm going to do it this way, but we'll see how it goes together. The last one I did not have a stud on it. This one will, so we'll see how that goes. Always something new to screw around with. But to start with, I'm going to put these aside somewhere where I won't screw them up or get them dirty. I've placed them over on the bell skiver. Don't let me forget that. The other parts on the bell skiver. We're going to start with this piece here, this kind of front to the bifold, or the front to the billfold there. And this wallet, as mentioned, is being made completely from red Botero. Friend is a fan of the color red. I'm going to try and find a piece of this hide to use. This is quite a nice hide. Now, when using the hide, it's a little hard to see. I'm going to see if I can, let me see if I can turn down the brightness of my camera here. Might be able to get some better. You can see that a little bit better there. We've got some character marks on the hide up here. Some of them are from me folding it like an idiot. Some of them are just part of the hide. But we've got a bit of loose grain up here. This here is the getting into edge of the belly, so you can feel it's noticeably softer there. This will be a largely structural part of the wall, so we don't really want to skimp too much. There is a time and a place when you can use belly and things with, rougher characters and things like that, generally on parts where you're going to be aligning something on the back side, something that is hidden but just needs to be covered more for texture and feel than anything else. But this one here is going to be fairly proud, right in the center there. We want to find a nice piece for this, and also a nice piece for the back side as well. I'm looking up here. Although this is an edge piece and there's a little bit of range marks on it, I actually think that'll look fairly nice in this particular application. Let's see here. No, I don't feel here. This, I think, will be a better back. Very dense. Take a look at the other side of the hide here. What else? I actually think this will work kind of nicely. And there's a little, you might be able to catch it right by my thumb. There's a little range mark there, but that will get covered up by, card slots there. I think we're going to go with this spot right here. It's nice and dense. It's not stretchy. It's fairly smooth. That one little defect there will be covered up 99% of the time. I think that will do nicely. And closer trim on this here. In fact, I'm going to turn the camera back up a little bit now. There we go. I generally like on my trims to keep them around 1/8 of an inch from the actual final dimension there. Kind of how I have all of my patterns designed. There's no real particular reason for that. I just find that works for me. It kind of minimizes waste. There. So now, let's see, how do I want to do this? I don't think I'm going to skive this. because actually there's not a whole lot in this wallet. There's not a whole lot of thickness to it. It's really only going to be card slots, which are fairly thin at the edges. This piece here, which is a structural piece, this is what's kind of holding the two things together. And the outside. And I think I'm going to keep this as it is. Let's see here. Put this up against our... That's about 1/8 of an inch thick. We'd be maybe adding another 1/16 of an inch, so we'd be about 3/16 of an inch thick at the edge. That's acceptable. And for something like this, for a big wallet like this, sometimes a little bit of extra thickness is desirable because it kind of completes the appearance. If you're going to carry a big wallet like this, you don't really want it to be flimsy. It's going to form to your pocket there. And part of the charm of these wallets is the fact that they're unabashedly large. So I think we're gonna leave that as it is. I don't think we're gonna skive that. I think we're just gonna go with what we got here. Let's see here. Put this back again, putting it back on the bell skiver. Don't let me forget. You're gonna get to see. I'm going to You can just barely catch it on the light there. We're gonna do some perforation on this. This is something I've been messing with. I mess with my camera again here. Good golly, I am really having a difficult time with lighting today. Kind of a cloudy and off and on rainy day today, so every time I adjust the camera, a cloud moves and something changes and it's all screwed up again. There we go. That looks a little more proper. But with the perforation, I plan to have a punch made for this. I kind of wanted to experiment with it some more to see if I actually liked the look of this. Did other people, did customers like the look of it? And so far the response has been good. So I was hesitant to spend money, probably looking around $250, $300 for a tool that will do this consistently. So for now I've just been doing it by hand. It's not so bad. On something like this, it's going to take me about 10-15 minutes, so we'll try to find something to talk about while we do this. But yes, every one of these holes is going to get punched. So let's take this out. This is actually before I got my punching mat. This is what I used to punch everything on. This is a poundo mat. I guess that's the actual brand name for it, is literally poundo. And they're good. They became very expensive. I seem to recall getting mine for like $10, and then every other time I looked at them, they were like 40 or 50. I don't quite know the how or why of that. It is just a big old thick piece of rubber. But they are good if you're kind of limited on space and can't do a whole desk mat. These are nice and compact, and I like to have it around because occasionally I need to do something somewhere else, and I just have it. And this is a good example of that. So before I do this, I actually realize I have to varnish the backside a little bit. I want to do that before I go punching holes in it. We're just going to take Tokenol, nicely spread along the backside there. And on these wallets, I don't line the inside of the billfold. I kind of keep it a little more Spartan in that way. I wanted to, when I came up with this, I wanted a design that looked visually distinct and interesting, but also did not take as much labor to make as the current bifold design I've been making. This one so far has actually met both criteria pretty well. That should do. Hit this with the glass slicker real quick. I like to do this against the marble, just because you get a nice compression of the grain there. You don't really need to go too crazy with this. That looks kind of splotchy, but that's actually only just because of the residual moisture of the toconol. As this dries, that will end up a nice kind of consistent, smooth, clean finish on the back there. So that when you do reach back there, you're feeling smooth, burnished leather rather than just rough, unfinished flesh. We're good to go ahead and take that. Now to do this, it relies on everything being in the same place. This template cannot move at all while we're doing this. So we're going to tape it down. This is just low-tack tape. Nothing really special. You may recall from last stream I talked about using tape directly on the flesh side and how you have risk of it lifting finish. You'll note that it doesn't really matter on this here because this is all going to get trimmed away. You want to be careful where you put tape down. You want to make sure that it's going to be on something that is not going to be seen or is going to be removed eventually. In this case, that is exactly what we're doing here. That should be sufficient. Now, before I put tape down up on the top, I want to make some guide lines here for myself. So that later on when I go to trim this and trace the actual outside shape of it, I've got some good marks down there where I know where to kind of index that. Just for good measure, I'm going to put this down on the top here too. We'll have a quick cup of coffee before we get on this. And looking at the pole, I see the margins have narrowed a little bit now. We've got some more light roast fans coming out now. I'd be curious to hear the whys of your decisions. Why do you prefer dark roast versus light roast? I was not always a coffee drinker. I kind of came to it relatively late. Came to appreciate it after a while. A friend of mine in Arizona always talked about really loving coffee and just loving the flavors of it. He recommended to me a blend of coffee made by David Lynch. It's called David Lynch Coffee. There's a house blend of it that I got, and that is, I think, it's certainly one of, if not the best coffee I've ever had. Didn't matter how you brewed it. It was good. It was good drip. It was good French press, AeroPress. Just a delightful, smooth cup of coffee. So if you have the opportunity to pick some of that up, the David Lynch Coffee House Blend, do yourself a favor and do it. You will not be disappointed. That was kind of a medium light roast, and God, it was just phenomenal, just wonderful. That kind of, I was curious about it. And I took his advice and bought the setup that he used, the AeroPress and all that stuff, and just wonderful. I've never had a cup of coffee I wouldn't drink. So very easy to please when it comes to coffee, but I still like all the good, all the bad. There's something to be said for all of it, in my opinion. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started on this. Again, yes, I am going to punch every single one of these, and it's not, punch is a misnomer. The trouble with doing it this way is that it is not actually removing leather, it is simply displacing it. So you get a little bit of variance, not enough to be noticeable, but it is there. And the biggest problem with this way is that you have to clean up the backside afterwards, because you're basically just, rather than removing a hole there, you're simply displacing it, pushing it into the back. So after this is done, we'll have a little bit of cleanup to do on the back there. This is an imperfect way of doing this, but it does work. And it didn't cost me a whole arm and a leg to buy a tool for it without being absolutely certain that it is something I want to do. I think I'll probably continue doing this. I'll probably reach out to Kevin Lee, have him make me a tool that doesn't count these. a 7-pointed set of punches that I can do 7 holes at a time and kind of work through and get this taken care of in a much more efficient and much cleaner method than this. But for now, this works. We'll go ahead and get on with it then. Maybe you know what I'll do? I think I'll get the Bell Skyver camera, the mobile camera, and move it over here and get a different angle on this that makes it a little more palatable. Plug it in here real quick. One concerning thing I've noticed about that mobile camera, now I know this is a setting in OBS I have to mess with. You can disable it when it's not being used, but I find that camera gets very warm while I have it plugged in and it's kind of idling. And I thought I had made it to where it doesn't have to, I thought I made it where it shuts off when I'm not using it, but apparently I did that wrong because it just kind of sits there on idling the whole time, and it just gets warm, and I don't like things that get warm. So there was some concern about that. You get this set up here. Get a brand new perspective on. That might be good. Let me see. There we go. Adjusting the brightness down again. There we go. All right. That should be pretty good. So Robert says, I remember my very first cup of coffee about 40 years ago from a percolator over a propane torch on the late night shift of an oil drilling rig. Convinced me to go back to school. Funny enough, those of you who hang out in the Discord have listened, we've been talking about doing some more camping, and my in-laws bought a nice little trailer. And my mother-in-law bought a percolator to keep in the trailer. And I'll tell you what, it was a damn good cup of coffee. I was shocked. I loved it. I was very, very pleased with the coffee that thing made. So I've always heard people talk about how bad percolator coffee is supposed to be. I liked it. I thought it was good. I thought it was great. So nothing too precise about this other than the positioning. Just literally just put it on the dot and push through. You can see we've got a couple done here. Now the thing with doing it this way is it is very tempting to lift this and look at what you've done there. You can't. It's got to stay exactly where it is. It has to stay down. That template cannot move. You do not move this template until these are all punched, because you run the risk of having it not be placed correctly. I realized last week I missed not necessarily an opportunity, but I wasn't quite back to speed yet with streaming comfort to talk about it. But yes, you knew it was going to come up. You knew we were going to talk about it. The passing of Queen Elizabeth II. Yep, there it is. You knew we had to say something about it. I was reminded of an anecdote. When Queen Victoria passed away, her son, Prince Albert, became King Edward. They were in a funeral procession on a ship. I can't recall the exact purpose of it, but he was on a Navy, I think a small destroyer or something, that he was being transported by sea. And he noticed that the flag was at half-mast. So he asked the captain, "Why is the flag at half-mast?" And the captain responded quite simply, "The Queen of England is dead, sir." To which he responded, "Well, the King of England lives." and so they put the flag at full mast, and they didn't fly it at half mast anymore. But I was found it to be an interesting anecdote, kind of indicative of the same kind of shock that was felt at the passing of Queen Victoria, in that life expectancies were shorter back then. So most of the people who were alive didn't know anything other than her. They never knew another monarch than Queen Victoria. And that's, the same way here. Although it mattered a lot less for us, it was fairly earth-shattering at the time. And there's all sorts of scholarly debate on whether this affected, the odds of World War I, starting with Kaiser Wilhelm no longer having his grandmother to kind of keep him in check, or how much that really mattered. But it does raise some interesting thought experiments. So we're moving along at a pretty good clip there. This doesn't take terribly long. I realize it's not particularly exciting. It is a little rough on the wrist, so I'm going to take a quick second there. See, that's really the bad thing, is that it a lot of wrist activity on this. And this row here marks, once I finish this line here, this marks the midway point. Take a, whoo! Oh, me oh my oh. Well, we're getting there. We're getting there. It's worth it when it's done, trust me. Like I said, I want to get a tool made to do this. I don't know that a punch can be made this small. I think pretty small. It's only maybe a millimeter, 2 millimeter most in size there. I think it should be able to have a punch made for that. Mostly I was concerned about the cost of such a thing. Very specialized tool. Using a hammer would save the wrist, but I find it to be a little unwieldy. I don't find I get as precise placement when having to use the punch, or using the punch and the hammer there. So I do it by wrist power. Believe me, I did try using the hammer, and I didn't like it. I didn't feel like I had as good control there. If I were making a new one, Steve, I would want to remove material, because again, it would remove the need for cleanup on the backside. It would be a more nicer looking hole, much cleaner all around. So I would ideally like to remove the material. A round dent might do it, but that still would not remove the problems inherent in doing it this way. A round dent would definitely work. It would do exactly the same thing here, just much quicker. So I had looked into that, but I figured, well, you know what, if I'm gonna spend the money on a round dent, I might as well just inquire about having an actual proper punch set made. So my gut feeling is that I would probably end up spending the same amount of money just to have Kevin make me a custom special punch than it would for me to buy a round dent. But yeah, I did look into that. like I said, the big question for me was, is this something I actually want to do more of in my designs? And after doing about 2 or 3 of them, I realized I do actually like it. People seem to like it. It looks interesting. So it is something I will pursue, but more than likely, probably for next year. I try not to change up my designs or construction methods within the year. I like to do the whole kind of model year thing because it lets me kind of focus on when I have a bunch of orders, like I do now. I Everything is the same. I'm not changing a bunch of stuff. I can just kind of work through it on autopilot, and I'm not trying to figure out, oh, do I do it this way or do I do it that way now? Everything is consistent and the same. What's funny, Thomas, is that most of the wrist strain is actually not on the pushing hand, but on the holding hand, just because it's trying to really hold it in place and accurately. It's a very very teeny tiny little spot, and it ends up being quite a degree of wrist use for that. So, but we're about 3/4 of the way there now. We're almost done, so we're getting there. Well, might as well get on with it. Right, just 4 more rows to go. Ugh, last 2. Oh, I'll be glad. Why did I choose to do this on a tall wall when I could have done it on something half this size? What a fool I am. Ugh. Ugh. Almost there. And last one. Okay. All right. Now we can finally see the fruits of this, and hopefully it is correct. Now, before I do that, I'm going to unpeel these one at a time. And before I lift it, I'm going to trace my margins on here. I have an accurate position of where this is in relation to these holes. All right. Let's see if I did this right or if I screwed it up. Hey, it looks good. Perfect. I like that. Now it's not perfect, but it's good enough. When you look at it as a whole, it's plenty fine. Now here's, like I said, here's the cleanup that I mentioned earlier, because again, we're not removing any leather, we're merely displacing it. We have to clean up this backside. But first, let's clean this up. And I'll tell you what, actually, I think I'm going to grab a drink of water and hit the head here. So let's take 5. When we come back, we'll get the skiving knife out, we'll clean that up, and we'll start putting these all together here. So I'll be right back. See you in about 3 or 4 minutes here. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Clean this backside. And do that with my skiving knife real quick. Me testing. Stand to be a little short. That's better. Okay. All right. Try and get close as we can to it and just try and, we're just kind of taking off. Cutting off what was pushed through. There. There we go. Get that on camera for you there. Little donut for you. And when we look at it again from the other side, you can see, actually, you can see how much more visibility you have through there, how much cleaner those holes look. Now, they still, here and there, a couple of them could still stand to have a needle push through them to clean them up a little bit more. On the whole, that's pretty good. Go over the front with my glass slicker a little bit, just to smooth that out, just a tiny, tiny bit, not a whole lot. I will take some, a little bit of tokenol, not much. We don't need a whole lot. I'm going to do it with my fingertip here. We're not even going to really apply pressure to the backside there. We're not even going to really burnish it. We're just going to let the tokenol soak in there and call it a day with that. That will be good enough. Go back through it here. Last bit of cleanup we're going to do. Take a needle, push it through, and just open these up just a little bit. Push any loose fibers out. So, yes, definitely some room for improvement with this particular method, but like I said, still kind of in between with this. All things considered, for the interesting visual effect it gives me, that probably took me about 15 minutes. That's worth it. That could be a lot worse. There are plenty of worse ways to lose 15 minutes. Almost down to the bottom there. So, we can run the needle through each and every hole. Those are fairly opened up, cleaned out. Looks reasonably smart from the backside. I'm going to call that complete. So now, we actually have to go about finishing this here. Drake, I just saw your question there. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that name. Hopefully somebody in the chat has heard of them and can help you with that. Now we've got to go about and trim this top edge here, so let's do that. Start there. I don't know why I choose to punish myself with all these shallow curves that can only be hand cut, but so be it. Now, the way this pattern is designed, line that up there, should line up perfectly with, does. Should line up perfectly on the inside edge with the top edge of this card slot and the top edge of this card slot. So that when I punch through there, and I want to do my little loop over the top of the card slot there, I'm also doing a little loop over the top of that piece of the interior too. I think on this one here I actually do. Yes, I do. It does get trimmed flush there. Okay, yeah. I'm going to do all 4 edges of this. This is what I meant by interrupting the flow and not being able to run on autopilot. This being a relatively new design, I still have to think about how to put it together compared to my usual bifolds, which I can basically do almost asleep. Bit of water dripping off my glass here. Don't want that on the watch. Okay. Here you'll notice I've got this little cutout I need to cut. Making myself some guide marks here. Oh, I don't often have need to use this, but it is very handy. This is my circle gauge. Windfire Designs. I've had this for a while. It is a very nicely made tool when you need to do varying radii. Looks like this guy. There. Actually, that can't be. Can't be right. Let's go with this one instead. Slightly larger radius on that. You can just barely make it out on the camera there. That is going to look like this. Oh, looks good. That's what's going to be the interior of the wallet. That will be the billfold that is towards you, and then the outer will be on the outside there. Go ahead and that cut. While I'm doing that, I'm going to turn the creaser on. This here has to be cut by hand, of course. I don't know why I do this to myself. Looks a little rougher than I would like, but all come out in the wash with a little bit of sanding, and once the creaser hits it, that will also help take out any small variances in the curve. Until that's warmed up, go in with the sanding block. Use that curved edge of it there, and work over that edge a little bit there. I think once the creaser hits that, That's going to be good to go. And being as this is want to get that spot there. We'll get a little bit more tokenol on that spot there. Being as red is a fairly lightly finished color of Botero, I don't want a lot of temperature on my creasing tip. I want it to be relatively, not so much cool, but I would say more warm. Definitely don't want it to be hot, because red will burn very, very easily. As I usually do, let's test it on a piece of scrap first. Getting a nice clean mark there. Still, even despite that, we're gonna start on the back side. And if we notice anything weird or that looks too dark or doesn't look right, we're gonna turn it off, let it cool down, and hit it again. But nope, that all looks nice. There. Crease along the bottom. Top. Oh, there's our creases done. Quick burnish. Bit of water in there. I used a little more water than I want to down there. See this kind of little dark spot down there? I'm going to leave that alone. I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to let that dry out. As long as you have the discipline to not go in and touch it and not try to burnish it too soon, with these colors here, generally 90% of the time, if you get a water spot, it will just dry out and not discolor it any further. But only if you don't touch it at all. If you put any kind of pressure on it or any kind of burnishing action on it, it'll stay there forever. So we're going to leave that bottom piece alone for the time being. Just stick to the top for now. We're good. Let's a quick go over with some 600. I think this top edge can be hit with tokenol. Call it a day on that. That'd be good to go. Actually going to hit it one more time with some 600. That can be a little bit smoother than it is. One more hit with the tokenol. You need very little. That should be about it to do this whole edge. I just pinch it between my thumb and my forefinger to kind of beat it up there. I can just walk it along the edge. The pinching action of your fingers forms a natural guide. Good. All right. Now that's good. Take a quick test fit of this, see how this looks. Still need to trim these two bottom edges here, but yeah, that looks nice. Happy with the way that looks. While we're letting that water dry out, I'm going to put these over again over on the bell skiver and let them get some airflow over them from the open windows. Fortunately, even though we have to wait to do anything else with that part, we have no shortage of other things to do. Still have to cut the back. Still have to cut the cover for the stud. I guess I might as well show you that. Up. This will be a chain wallet. This will be a stud that sticks out of the spine. That is where the chain attaches. That feels nice. I need to put a shim there. Something a little bit thicker to grip that. That'll kind of stick out the back there, ostensibly out of the top of your back pocket. And there's, of course, the chain. I need to cut this to size. At least I think. I don't think he wants a chain that long. I'll have to ask him. Then on the ends of the chain, I have two options. Fish hook. A small and a large. I think probably the large will be better, but that will, of course, be the user's choice. I think that's going to be a very interesting one when it's all put together. I'm looking forward to seeing it all completed here. Back. Ay. Rapidly reaching a point where I need to aggressively clean the shop again, but I'm just not feeling it yet. Going back to our piece of hide here, I remember thinking that this spot would look nice because I like that it's dense, it's smooth, and I actually like, you can look closely, you can just make them out on the camera here. We've got some nice natural stretch marks here that just kind of look interesting. And that ends up being the perfect size for our outer here. Yeah. I like that. I think that'll be it. I think that will be the spot that we use. Let's brush it real quick, see what it looks like. I like that. Yeah, that's going to be it. People keep voting on the poll, and it is closing in rapidly. Light has overtaken dark. Oh, well, how about that? Who'd have thought? I remember when I was first looking into looking into trying to make my own coffee and make actually good coffee. I remember reading online, I was like, oh, what beans should I use? And the overwhelming response was, use whatever's locally roasted and freshest. Like, oh, okay. And naturally, there was nothing here in Youngstown. There were no options. This was about maybe 10, 12 years ago. We had no options for freshly roasted coffee. And now, we have tons of them. We have any choice you could want. I can think of 4 or 5 different roasteries just right here in town. So it's been nice to see that kind of develop and grow. It gives me a good hope for this area in the near future. Allegedly, light has more caffeine. There's still a lively debate over whether or not that's true. They say that the darker roasts tend to roast more of the caffeine out. I've heard conflicting opinions about that. But that was the traditional dogma, was that, light has more caffeine and dark has less. I don't know if that's true. I'm mostly thinking from a flavor perspective. I just kind of I think I like dark roasts better. I still love a good light roast, no doubt. Like I said, my favorite coffee, the David Lynch, is a light roast, light or medium roast. So ultimately, I'm pretty easy to please. All right, let's check some messages real quick. Good. All right. Nobody trying to get a hold of me. Excellent. This will be our backside. This will actually be the exterior of the wallet. So we're going to want to do a nice burnish for the inside here. This, you can see if you look closely, it's got a little bit of fiber going on there. Not to worry, we're going to burnish all that down. This might take 2 burnishes. Hello, Ann. Good to see you. That's my mom. We're just going to take the tokenol and be pretty liberal with it here. Get that spread all around there. And because this is such a large piece, I'm going to do this in stages. I'm going to do this section, probably do it in about 2 or 3 different sections at a time here to try and get good absorption and good coverage. So I want to really work these fibers down before this dries up. After I'm done streaming here, I'm going to take my wife to the grocery store we have not been to in about 4 or 5 weeks because while we both had COVID, Ann there and several others very kindly continued to supply us and bring us groceries throughout the whole time, so we have not been to the store in many weeks. We have not needed to, fortunately, which has been nice. Good to have friends and family around. The moral of that little anecdote. There, looking good. Okay. That's cleaned up a little bit there. I'm going to let that dry out a little bit more. And what I think I'll probably do is hit that lightly with some sandpaper and burnish it again. The idea being that the sandpaper will ideally lift and carry away any loose fibers that it pulls up, and then when we burnish them again, whatever's left over will be slicked back down, and we'll have a nice, really clean-looking interior space to look at there. Take a look and see if our moisture has dried up yet, and it has. That dark spot that we had in the corner there is almost completely gone. We can go back and finish this up. But just to be on the safe side, I'm not going to use any more water on this spot. I'm going to use tokenol instead. And tokenol is a good option to use on, you'll notice that, most of you who watch me regularly know that I really only use tokenol when like doing the flesh side here or on the very final burnishing step. But sometimes on leathers where they're very sensitive to moisture, I'll use tokenol for the whole burnish process. So I'd use a little more materials, but I like to do that because it is more viscous than water. So there's less risk of it just randomly being absorbed into the fibers and spreading to places you don't necessarily want it. So this would be one of those cases where I want to be a little more careful, want a little more control over where this is going. Here. kind of gently working that canvas. I like that. There we go. There's our backside for the billfold. And good. Set this aside again because we really don't need it yet. Now, you notice, like I talked about earlier, you remember how dark it was down here where the toconol was fresh. It's mostly evened out and flattened out. That tells me that it's dry enough to stripe with sandpaper a little bit. I'm going to use the block to get consistent pressure on. I'm not sanding super aggressively, just relatively lightly, trying to lift up anything loose. If you see a little bit of dust, you can just barely make it out there. Those are little fibers that have picked up and carried away. We did pick up a fair bit from that. We're going to smooth it back down again. You'll know your burnish is working, either if you're doing a backside or if you're doing an edge, when you notice it takes less product to cover the same surface area. That means that you're condensing the fibers down. It's not just soaking it right up. It's not just drinking it up as you put it on there. It's actually spreading across the surface a little bit because you've made a denser surface there. That's what you want. Right off the bat, see that looks pretty sharp. It's looking nice and smooth. Again, that splotchiness will go away, kind of consolidate as we let that dry. We'll end up with just a nice kind of deep, smooth red back to the inside of the wallet. Should be it for that. Did kind of a dumb thing there. Stuck it to the bench while it was still a little moist. Picked up a bunch of loose fibers that were sitting there, but they brushed off. Having a brush around is pretty important. So, again, that looks a little cloudy now. That will even out as it dries. But that's nice and smooth. There's no loose fibers back there. That's a pretty big change from how it was when we first cut that. You remember it was kind of fibrous on the back, despite it being nice and dense on the other side there. You'd be surprised what a little bit of elbow grease and a glass slicker can do for you. While that's drying, stick that aside here. Let's go ahead and get these pieces glued together so we can start to test fit some things here. Right. We're going to go ahead and scuff up the edges here. I'm going to leave the bottoms of these untrimmed. I'm going to trim them when they're together, just to make sure I've got everything right. And it just gives me a little bit more breathing room to adjust and fit as needed. I don't like to fully commit to anything until I'm sure. That gives me just a little more option. If you leave yourself an out, you can generally fix any error or any issue that arises. And they do. You have to prepare for the eventuality that maybe something wasn't cut right, or maybe you measured wrong. That does happen, and you can work around it and make a product that is still perfectly functional, perfectly beautiful. But you have to leave yourself the ability to do that. That's why I choose not to cut everything to exact size. I cut it oversized and I trim after putting it all together. That is exactly why I do that. Because it gives me the ability to adjust the fit as I go. And I try not to trim it until I'm actually putting it into the place where it needs to finally go. Get that roughed up a little bit on the back. Any questions so far while we've been going? Anything, any thoughts, any curiosities? Please do let me know. I'm happy to answer anything. It doesn't have to be about this, can be about anything. It does not have to be about this project. I think what we'll do here, I think I'm going to get these pieces glued together. And then I think I'm going to call it a day for streaming. Go to the grocery store, get all that done, have some lunch, come back and try and finish this. So I think about another 10 minutes here, and then I'm going to wrap it up here. So any questions or thoughts, now would be a good time to put them in chat. My glue. There's my glue. What does a father look for in a wallet? That almost sounds like the beginning of a joke or a riddle of some kind. That's a hell of a question. I'm afraid I haven't got a good answer to you for that one. But I find that most older folks, which will generally be your fathers or grandfathers, most frequently I find they're looking for the traditional bifold design. They want some kind of ID window or something like that. I find very frequently is a commonly requested element. One side there. A little bit of trimming to do there, but not much. Good. Looks lining up nicely. I punch the stitch holes on my pockets first, use them as a guide for the back. I'm not 100% certain what you mean. I think I know what you mean. What I will do, because I can't access these stitches later, I punch all these first. And what I will do, actually on this wallet, because it isn't that thick, I probably will punch it all together. So I'll probably actually glue it all completely down and then punch it at once. On my bifolds, you know, I punch the interior separately from the exterior. On this one here, I probably will not, just because there isn't that much thickness or distance to go through. So it's fairly safe to do it all in one go. My bifolds tend to be a little bit thicker than this, despite being smaller in size. That was a compromise I came up with for that particular construction method. But on this one, if I'm understanding you correctly, no, I'll probably punch it all at once. The reason I have these holes up here is because these were necessary to help establish the positioning for where these had to end. These both have to end at the same spot relative to card slots there, and the easiest way to do that is just to punch holes in it and use that as your guide. So these both end in the same spot on either side. That way it all kind of lines up properly. So in that sense, yes, I did use those stitch holes as a guide, but only for the relative position of the stitch across the top. That will have to match up with, there will be a separate stitch across the top of this that will line up with, but we haven't done that yet. Probably do that, like I said, after the stream, just because it isn't that exciting. There's not a whole lot to show with that. Have that there. This is kind of where we're going with this. This will be the interior. So the interior is pretty much complete. That'll be the outside there, and then somewhere right up in here is where our stud will go for the chain. It's just a matter of practice. Like I said, the total thickness of the design matters a lot. This one here also being red stitches on red leather, I feel a lot more comfortable not having to take extra precautions for that. Now, like on that white wallet with the brown stitching, where it is brown against white on both sides, that's one where you want to take every possible precaution to make that punching of those holes easier and more accurate for yourself, because it will, if there's anything wrong at all, it will instantly be visible. This one here, if I had an errant stitch where something wasn't perfectly lined up, you would have to really study it to notice it, again, just because it is red stitches on red leather all around. So it everyone's a little bit different. It just kind of depends on what it is you're making that day. But I think that's a good stopping point. Hour and a half is a good length of time, I think. Yeah, that'll happen. That's one of the benefits of having the bell skiver, is that you get more consistent skives all across the same distance. When you're doing a pass with a bell skiver, you know it will be the same all around there, and you have less of that issue. So that's something you basically just learn to account for as you're going it. When you start to get things that are skived extremely, when you have a lot of thick leather, and you start to end up with edges that are, rather than shaped like this, but are shaped like this, that becomes very awkward to account for, because then if you're having your pricking irons, just perpendicular to the edge, you'll come out basically on the corner of that, and you have to kind of angle them in. You have to have kind of a toe to them to get them to come out on the right spot. And that's just the kind of thing where you have to do it enough to, you have to screw it up enough to become aware of what can go wrong. So just keep at it. Be aware of everything that happens. Don't beat yourself up over it. It takes time to learn, number one, what can go wrong, number two, why, and then number three, how to account for it. So there's a lot to learn to punching holes. It's quite a tricky thing. It is not a matter of just take pricking iron and hit with hammer. That's what it looks like, but there's a lot more to it than that. So, and again, it's just something you figure out by doing it. So I could probably come up with a different situation for each day of the week, and I'd probably come up with another set of them the next week. So just do it as much as you can, and don't be too discouraged by the things you don't like. Just be aware of them, and then you can mitigate them in the future. It's all about mitigation. Nobody ever eliminates these problems completely. It's all about making them less apparent, or or less likely to happen, but they still do happen. I think on that note, I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm going to give my voice here a break and then probably go to the store. Keep an eye out for this one here in the next couple of days. I appreciate everybody sitting in and asking good questions. I hope this was entertaining. Something a little bit different than what I usually do here, so I'm trying to kind of find some more interesting things to do. I have a lot of commissions on the books right now, so I've got a lot of different things to show. I think the next one I do may be a full alligator journal cover, so that'll be certainly an interesting one to do. Very frightening to do on camera, but why the hell not? So I hope everybody has a good day. Once again, thank you for all the company. Thank you for the well wishes over the past couple of weeks. It was very nice to hear that from all of you. So I appreciate your patience while I recovered and got back to this. So hope everybody has a good day. And again, any questions or things like that, feel free to leave in chat or email to me. I'm always happy to answer. I hope to see you next Monday, and have a good day.